right, so thank you again for joining us for this month's rendition of the Elevate Northwest series, Expanding Your Reach Through Online Accessibility. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Seattle Public Utilities, Reach King County, and Business Health Trust. I believe a few of them are here today, so please feel free to say hello in the chat. Thank you all for your continued support of the Chamber's programming. I would also like to thank our small business champions today, Amazon, Boeing, JLL, Kaiser Permanente, and Puget Sound Energy. And with that, I would like to welcome our speaker, Israel Serna with Grow with Google. Israel has spent the last 15 years working in various roles within the public and private sector across various industries, including the Small Business Development Center, the Specialty Coffee Association, Constant Contact, and other e-commerce software as a service companies, while serving several multicultural communities along the way. He takes pride in having the opportunity to organize and speak at hundreds of industry conferences on topics related to e-commerce, social media marketing, job skill trainings, and resume building. Thank you so much for joining us today, Israel. I am going to stop screen sharing and I'm going to let you take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Vivian, for the introduction and more importantly for hosting me this evening or afternoon, I should say. It's a pleasure to be a part of this series, and more importantly, that we get to offer such trainings to entrepreneurs. So today's training, as you mentioned, is titled Make Your Small Business More Accessible, and it's brought to you by Grow with Google. I'll take a few seconds just to mention a little bit more about the Grow with Google program in case you're not familiar with the program. But the Grow with Google program is an initiative by Google to help entrepreneurs like yourself to grow and succeed online. And we do this through trainings like the one you're participating in this afternoon. So today in this presentation, we're going to go over best practices for making digital communications and physical stores accessible to all customers. And we'll show you why taking these steps to be more inclusive is so important for your business. Once again, I'm Israel Serna, and I'm joining you virtually from my home office here in Los Angeles, California. It's a true pleasure to be spending this afternoon with you. I'm a trainer and speaker with the Grow with Google program. And if you're interested in staying in touch with me, if you have questions after today's webinar, feel free to reach out to me via email, which is on your screen now, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, which is a platform that I use to not only communicate and share upcoming trainings, but frequently I like to share articles that are related to digital marketing best practices, loyalty programs, email marketing, things of that nature. So if you're interested in connecting with me, feel free to also look me up on LinkedIn. I'd like to also take the opportunity to thank Vivian, Isabel, and the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce for producing and hosting this series, but most importantly for their partnership with the Grow with Google program. Okay. So before we get started, I do have a short video to share with you, and it's a video of a family, and we're gonna take a look at this video and then return to look at today's agenda. So here we go.
I'm what's called a coda. My parents were both born deaf. I was not. When people in the hearing world learn that about me, they always want to know more.
You start out your forehead and then go out with your hand.
I've always had one foot in the deaf world and one in the hearing world. I translated a lot from my parents. It made us closer. Now that it's been over a year since we've seen each other in person, communication is more important than ever. Especially with this guy.
Who is that, Owen? Who is that? That's you!
It's their first time being grandparents, so they don't want to miss a single moment. And I don't either. We can't wait for you to meet him.
So the video we just saw shows us just how much of an impact accessibility can make on a personal level. But we will show you today what it means to reach people with disabilities as a small business owner.
I'm what's called a CODA.
Let's move on to the next slide. So in today's workshop, we're going to discuss what we mean by accessibility, just to make sure that we're all on the same level and that we understand what we mean when we're talking about making accessible or things accessible to other folks. And then how to design a website with accessibility in mind, how to create emails that are easier to read and understand. We'll also take a look at what it means to have physical accessibility should you have a brick and mortar location. And then some tips that can help your business be more inclusive. So let's get started. So in the chat, I'm going to invite you, or actually through a poll in a second, you're going to see a poll appear. And I have a couple of questions, and the questions are really intended for me to learn a little bit more about who is joining us on this webinar today. So in a second, you're going to see a poll where I'm asking you if you can identify the type of business you are running. So the first question is, what type of business are you involved with? Is this a brick and mortar business, an e-commerce business, or if you're doing a combination of both, an omni-channel business? The second question is, do you have a business website currently? So you can let me know whether you do or you don't. And there's really no wrong answer to the question about your business website, because you may actually be a new business or a pre-nascent business that's about to launch a business website. So if you can just let me know and help me really understand who is in the audience, that's going to also help me with the rest of the presentation so that I can make sure to highlight specific things related to your business, okay? So let's give it a couple more seconds. I see that about 71% of you have taken the poll. I'm hoping maybe we can get one more person to complete the poll. So let's give it a few more seconds before we close. Okay. All right, so 2 questions, and you should be able to see, again, a poll pop up on your screen. Here we go. Okay, so we are now at 85% participation. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you, so that way you also can see who's joining us this afternoon. So first things first is I'm seeing, and this is really great, I actually really love to see that about 50% of you, or half of you, are currently running an omni-channel type of business, meaning you have a brick and mortar business or an office where customers come to you, and then separately you have a business or some sort of e-commerce presence online. So that's great, and we're seeing more and more businesses go this route. And then we see about 33% of you that are exclusively e-commerce, and then the remaining percent of you, 17%, that are just brick and mortar type businesses. And then the second question was around your business website. And this actually really brings a lot of happiness to me, because I love the fact that 83% of you currently count with a business website. And this is super critical to reaching a wide variety or larger group of individuals, because when we do have a website, that means that our chances of us getting discovered by prospects or customers goes higher because we have a presence online. So I want to salute you for making that effort and for taking that first step of creating a business website for yourself, okay? Now, for the remaining 17% of you that possibly don't have a website yet, or maybe working on a website, for today's presentation, what I would love for you to get out of this is that there are going to be some tips here that I think you should be considering as you start to develop your website. Now, for those of us that already have a business website, what I'm hoping that this presentation will do for you is either help you confirm that your website is up to date, is up to code, and it is user-friendly across all levels. So there are some tips for you in case you are not quite there yet. Hopefully you can apply some of the things that I'm going to be covering today, okay? Okay, so now that we got that out of the way and I have a better understanding of who's in the audience, let's now quickly review and come to understand what we mean by accessibility, which is the whole foundation of today's presentation. So to understand accessibility, you first need to understand the challenges that people with disabilities often face in their daily lives. So some disabilities are visible while others are not immediately apparent. But someone with any type of impairment may encounter barriers to completing certain tasks or activities. So accessibility in this case ensures that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the products, the services, and tools available to the rest of your customers, okay? So often this can be done with the help of assistive technologies, which we're going to learn about, that break down those barriers. So here's the main benefit that we have as a small business owner is that we have access to many tools that are going to help us provide a better experience to all individuals. And that's a big advantage. And I'll tell you, and I'll mention this now, that I've been in this industry for now close to or more than 15 years. And I'll have to say that we've made vast improvements in the digital marketing space to make sure that not only websites, but also digital marketing efforts and communication are inclusive for more individuals, okay? So let me share a couple of statistics for you so that it can help you understand the reach and the power of the individuals that we are trying to reach by incorporating some of these tactics today. So the World Health Organization estimates over 1 billion people worldwide who live with some sort of disability, okay? So that's 15% of the world's population and 1 in 4 adults in the United States. So that means that over 25% of your potential customers in the US have a disability. Another thing to think about, which as I was going through this training myself, is that, you know, I failed to also count those individuals who might have a temporary disability. So you may have customers currently that don't have a disability, but maybe they get into an accident and break a hand or an arm, which means that they are disabled for a particular period of time in some instances. So this is also something that we need to keep in mind. Now, globally, people with disabilities have over $6 trillion in spending power. So if your business isn't thoughtful about how to connect and communicate with these potential customers, you're missing out on a large group of people with significant resources. So let's focus for this half of the presentation. It's going to be more focused on digital accessibility. So we're going to focus on digital accessibility for now and how your business can get to building for accessibility. So building for accessibility means producing digital content that people with disabilities can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with. So it is about designing your business communications, your products and physical space in ways that allow people with disabilities to engage. So people can't buy your products and services if they can't understand and engage with them. So building for accessibility is good for business since it expands your market. And the bonus, and this is one of the main benefits to the presentation that we're going to be giving today, is that many of these tactics are also able to improve the experience for all users. So by going the extra mile and taking these steps that we're going to cover today, you're not only helping ensure that your business is accessible to those with disabilities, but you're going to find that these tactics are also great for all users, okay? Now, just to kind of give you a perspective of what I mean by that is, let's just quickly take a ride, for example, to a local bar where a football game is on TV, right? So in a local bar, for example, being able to enable the closed captionings because it's a noisy bar is not only going to help everybody who can't hear to be able to read the closed captioning, but at the same time, you'll also be able to help those individuals with a hearing impairment. So this is what we mean by some of these tactics can also be well for all individuals, not just those with a disability, okay? So now as we focus on just the digital aspect of things, let's talk about universal design. So universal design means designing for everyone, whether they have a disability or not. So universal design can help those with and without disabilities better comprehend digital content. It includes many different techniques to help people comprehend digital content, including image descriptions, alternative text, or as it's sometimes known in the space, alt text, color contrast, design techniques, formatting, and finally, video captions and transcripts. So we're going to explore each of these in more detail now. And here's the thing about today's presentation is we do want it to be interactive. So we want you to, chat with us, provide your thoughts in the chat, feedback as we present, okay? So we're going to do an exercise in a minute. So I want you to definitely make sure that you locate the chat feature, because this next section is actually going to encourage you to type in the chat, okay? So let's talk about alternative text, or again, as it's known in the industry, alt text, okay? And this, by the way, is something that I cover in my web design session. We talk a lot about alternative text because when you are creating a website, you are, in most cases, uploading images of your product or images of, if you're like a plumber, for example, a service-based business, you may be uploading images of your work. So adding alternative text for images is a key principle of web accessibility, and it is also one of the most difficult to properly implement. So I could technically offer a whole session on this subject, but we're gonna just focus on the high level stuff. So let's start with a quick exercise. And my question for you is, so there's an image on the screen that I'm displaying. So in the chat, I would like to ask you, if you were thinking about alternative text, right? Once you upload the photo to your website, how would you describe this image that's on the screen, okay? I know it's coffee, but what else? How else would you describe this image that you're seeing on the screen, okay? So I'm gonna give you a couple seconds to think about it and then go to the chat, and I'm gonna read some of your responses before I continue. Anyone in the chat? Okay, here we go. Okay, so we've got SL. I'm only seeing your initials. So SL says a white cup on a saucer filled with coffee placed on a table with a spoon. Okay, that's good. Anybody else? So somebody, like SL said, this could also be a white ceramic cup filled with black coffee on a saucer with a spoon. Okay, great. All right, so, but with alternative text, here's the thing that we need to remember is that context is key. So you should ask, what meaning is this image supposed to convey? Is there a reason to include that amount of detail in the description? So alternative text should represent the content in context. Okay, so let me repeat that again. Alternative text should represent the content in context and function of the image. So sometimes we overthink the description because we think that it needs to be this paragraph of keywords and this long description. But here's the key thing that we need to remember when we are uploading images to our website is that context is everything, okay? So for example, with this particular image, if the purpose of this image or us uploading this image is to help customers understand the type of coffee that's available on a menu, then of course we would just say coffee. Now, if this image was uploaded to a website where you're selling the actual saucer, then you would say white ceramic cup and saucer. Okay, so again, we have to think about whether the alt text that we are using is going to provide context. Okay, so the reason this is important is that up until now, Google in this particular instance, or scanning services, don't read images or can't read images unless we provide an alt description. Okay, so again, this isn't us uploading or giving it an alt text just because we want to give it, take advantage of like search engine optimization, which we're going to talk about in a minute. The key thing here is we want to give it an alt text that makes sense and that's going to allow the scanners that are scanning our website to understand what is being displayed. Okay. So when you add an image to your website, you have two distinct ways for visitors to understand. So you've got alt text, which is the behind the scenes, and then you've got a description, or as some people know it, as a caption. So alt text is sort of like the behind the scenes label for an image on a website. And this can only be seen on, this cannot be seen on your website. So again, this is behind the scenes. Now, a description that is client facing. So there are folks who do both. They will add an alternative text on the back end and then provide a description, which is a really good best practice. Okay. So again, we've got alt text and then the descriptions, which are two different things. Now, in addition to images, we also want to be cognizant about the anything visual that's like graphs, for example, like you're seeing on your screen, or charts. So these are a little bit more trickier because charts and graphs are really hard for screen readers to be able to read. So in these, if you are in a business or industry where you are displaying charts or graphs, you're going to want to make sure that you are not only including a description like you're seeing on your screen here, but in some cases, it may be helpful to point them to a second page or a different landing page where you're able to provide more context around the chart or the graph. So again, these could be a little bit trickier, and depending on the type of business that you're in, you may want to consider, like we just said, hyperlinking to a separate landing page where you're providing more context around the chart or graphs. Now, I am going to reference a lot of great resources throughout the presentation. You can jot them down as I mentioned them, but I do have them on a list that is on the slide deck. And because we are going to be providing a copy of the presentation, you're going to be able to access all of these resources that I'm going to reference during the presentation. So in particular, if you want to understand how you can better display charts or graphs, you can go to the World Wide Web Consortium, which is w3c.org, and search for complex images. So there you can learn a little bit more about how detailed that you can get with your descriptions, or best practices for linking to external landing pages to be able to describe these charts and graphs. Okay, so this resource is World Wide Web Consortium. As part of my training, I will mention that I spent a lot of time on this website, and there's a lot of fantastic resources. And here's what I'm going to mention, in case you are new to this, if this is a new concept for you, it can feel rather intimidating because you want to make sure that your website, is up to date and that you are providing the best experience, and you may be feeling overwhelmed. Okay, and that's okay. I'll tell you that a lot of us are still trying to educate ourselves to be able to improve our own web presence, and so these links and resources that I'll mention do provide a great great insight, and I just think they're super educational. Okay, so let's move on to color and talk a little bit about color specifically on your websites. So color is an important tool for making your content accessible. So those with visual disabilities can see darker colors more clearly than lighter colors in general, okay? But it's not just the colors. In making color choices for your content, it's also important to take into consideration contrast between background and text. So the colors should be similar enough so that text is readable. So here on your screen, we can see how contrast can affect readability. In the example on the left colors, for example, these have lower contrast, making the letters more softer and muddier to look. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to compare it with something that's a little bit more high contrast. The combination is high contrasting, which lets the letters stand out sharply, increasing readability. So these are design standards of color contrast for regular sized and large font. You can learn more about this at the website that I just mentioned, which is w3cs.org, under the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Now, while color is a powerful tool, relying on color to indicate distinctions may leave behind the 300 million people who have color blindness, okay? So an example is, consider a traffic map that shows clogged routes in red and roads with good traffic flow in green. If someone can't distinguish between green and red, how will they know which route has less traffic? So these are some design techniques that I'm sharing with you on the screen that can help it make it easier for people with this disability to see your website or the content on your website. So we'll go through these quickly, just so that you can get a chance to understand what I mean. So here's tip number one, is to use high contrast colors, okay? Hues, light versus dark. Saturation is also a great tool, so intensity of the color. And then brightness is also a key factor. We're also recommending that you use thick lines, that you use various patterns or dashed lines. I have a graph on the next slide that shows you what I mean by this. And then it's also important that we don't assume that color conveys a specific meaning. We want to make sure that we use textures to distinguish objects, add patterns or labels to ensure contrast in charts. And then finally, don't forget to label elements like titles, legends, and X and Y axes, okay? All right, so here are some examples of these design techniques that I just mentioned. So here on your screen, you're seeing what this graph looks like in color. And then here's what your graph could look like in gray. So notice that even though there is a gray scale here, they've also incorporated patterns to the graph to distinguish between the different tones of gray. So this isn't just about like a scale from light to darker gray. You'll notice that they've incorporated these patterns. Now, here's what I was referring to when I was mentioning that within like maps or things like that, charts, that relying on color or color contrast isn't just enough in some cases. So using dashed lines can also help you distinguish the difference. And then also labels, as you can see here, okay? Okay, so if you have ever scanned the headlines or subheads of an article or instruction book, typically you're gonna find that we scan with this in mind, with headings. So for example, when I'm scanning articles, I usually scan for the heading and then the subheading, which helps me understand and sort of intake what the article is about. So assistive technologies, for example, or technologies that scan or read for people who have like a sight impairment, for example, read the same way. And here's the thing about when I was going through this training, you know, there was a lot of correlation with the way that, for example, when people are applying for jobs, you know, these days, a lot of companies are relying on assistive technology to scan resumes. And what you're gonna find is that a lot of these technologies or scanners are scanning the way that a human brain or a human would scan. Specifically here in the States, we start from left to right. Now, depending on the country that you're in, it may be right to left, right? But in the particular instance, in the United States in particular, we start from left to right. And here's the thing about assistive technologies is that they're scanning the same way, and they're reading for subject lines, they're reading for headlines, and they're reading for subheads. So by incorporating some of these tactics into articles that you're producing, blog articles, these are also going to be well interpreted by the scanning or assistive technologies that we're using. Now, this is something that a best practice that I started to incorporate a couple of years back. And the reason why I know about this particular best practice is that it applies to email marketing. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about email marketing later, but this is how I got introduced to this particular best practice. So in general, when we are formatting text links, meaning that you're hyperlinking a particular website to a particular word or phrase, like you're seeing on your screen, okay? So well-written text links set the user expectations about where the link will take them if they click on it. So again, in general, a best practice that you want to apply across all your digital marketing assets is to make sure that those written texts or links include a description of where those individuals are going to end up. So for example, on the screen here, you can see that the text says, visit the Grow with Google homepage for free training tools and resources to help you grow your skills, careers, or business. Now, as you can see here, the text link is very descriptive. So I don't technically have to click on this link to know where I'm going to land. Now, what you want to avoid, and this is something, again, a best practice that we've been encouraging for a couple of years now, and now that we know more about accessibility, the bonus is that you're also going to be helping those that rely on assistive reading technology to better understand what these links are. So what you do want to avoid or try to avoid is using short descriptions like the one you're seeing here. So this link in this particular interest is not doesn't provide enough of a description, and it's very vague. So the tip that we will give you is to try to be descriptive and try to give people an idea of what they're going to see or where you're taking them should they click on the link. Okay. All right. So when it comes to closed captioning, we gave you the example earlier of the football game on TV in that noisy bar. Okay, so that's one of the instances that closed captioning could serve you and serve everyone in the bar. So let's now focus on videos for your business. Perhaps you have a YouTube channel, or maybe you are creating stories on your social media platforms. So when it comes to videos in general, video marketing is trending. It's something that a lot of businesses are leveraging. And so closed captioning and transcripts are also a great tool to enable when you are producing a video. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of some platforms and the way that you can enable closed captioning or transcripts within those channels. So here, if you have a YouTube channel, for example, you can enable the closed captioning and toggle between the closed captioning. You can also have it so that it's automatically providing closed captioning, which is available currently in English, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish. Okay, so those are all the languages. Now, here's the thing about YouTube in particular is that you do have the capability, for example, we know that these closed captioning tools are not a person actually typing. This is a machine, right, interpreting my words and then transcribing. And we know that there could be human errors to that because it's a machine that's translating. So the good thing is that you can always go in to edit that closed captioning or that transcript if you'd like, or you can actually upload the transcript ahead of time so that the machine has the transcript to read, okay? So this is YouTube in particular. Vimeo, which is another video platform, also allows users to toggle their auto captioning tool on and off. And by the way, Zoom, which is the platform that we're using today, also allows you to turn off or off the closed captioning, okay? And this is, by the way, being obviously shared with you live, and so the closed captioning is done live. You'll also notice that platforms like the TED Talks or videos like TED Talks are also providing the service. And you can see here, like through this speech bubble icon on the video player. So this opens up a window to select language for subtitles, which will play when the viewer returns to the video and starts to hit play. TikTok, I'm actually quite impressed with the way that TikTok has been able to enable these influencers and content creators to also generate captions for their videos that have sound or voice. So creators have the option to toggle this feature on and off, which I think is great. So some platforms also offer video transcripts too. So for example, here on YouTube, you can offer live transcripts without timestamps as well. And transcripts can also be uploaded, as I mentioned earlier, to create the video captions of your video. So a quick YouTube tip, you can ensure that all of your video captions text is accurate by starting with the automatic transcript, and then you can always go in and edit if needed, okay? So I know some folks rely on the automatic captioning, and then they go in and fix the errors that the machine wasn't able to really grasp, okay? YouTube has a help center, and you're gonna see that in the link to resources, where you can learn more about subtitles and captions for your YouTube video. Now, PDFs, this is a tricky one, okay? I get this question a lot when I'm talking about websites. One of the common questions is, for example, does Google read PDFs? Like, can it actually download the PDF from my website and scan, okay? Now, PDFs are tricky because PDF documents often require more thought and effort to make more accessible. So complex PDFs with like images and diagrams are generally not accessible through assistive technology, but even text-only PDFs can be difficult for assistive technology to interpret. So if you use PDFs, using the tagging or remediation software provided by Adobe to add accessibility is the way to go. So the good thing is that Adobe does offer tips, and it also offers services to make those accessible. So you do have to take that extra step, okay? So now let's talk about email marketing for a sec, or just email communication accessibility. And this is something that I've been talking about for a number of years now because I do have an email marketing background. And some of these best practices that I'm going to share with you, again, they're really can be applied to your website as well. Okay, so here's the thing with email marketing is that we have to remember that when these assisted technologies are scanning your emails, they're scanning from left to right, okay? So the tip number one is we want to make sure that we avoid columns. So if your existing email marketing platform or template is divided in columns, you're going to want to do away with multiple columns and just stick to one. Now, separate to that, I'll share with you that having columns is also not mobile friendly. So when you have columns on your email, it's also very difficult from a mobile perspective. So the benefit to you applying these tips is that it's not only going to help with accessibility, but it's also going to ensure that your emails look and feel and provide a better experience on mobile devices, okay? So this is what we mean, by the way, by being mindful of logical reading order, because these scanners scan from left to right, okay? So one column layouts is the way to go. Now, links in this particular instance, also, we want to make sure that when we're providing links, we want to make sure that we avoid calls to actions that are vague. like learn more, get started, click here. And I actually, this last year, since going through this training, I've been very cognizant of my own emails to make sure that my calls to action or my buttons are a little bit more descriptive, because again, we have to remember that these scanners are, they want to understand where we're going to be sending these folks to, okay? Now, one sad thing is I'm super at fault for this, but I love emojis on my email subject lines. And while we're saying to not completely avoid them, what we're saying is just be mindful that sometimes emojis don't get translated accurately when the scanners are reading your subject lines. So just be mindful of the type of emojis that you are using and just make sure that they're relevant to the subject line, okay? The other thing too is with emojis, make sure that you're not using an emoji to express something important, because it can be missed by the scanners, okay? Okay, so best practices for email marketing is to maintain a 60-40 text to image ratio, okay? So too much text or too many images can make navigation difficult. I will tell you as an extra tip, one of the things that I talk about when I'm providing tips for email marketing is keep it simple, picture, paragraph, call to action. Okay, so if you are struggling with email marketing or what to say or how to assemble an email, keep it simple. Picture, paragraph, call to action. I love that in this particular instance, they're saying a 60-40 text to image ratio. I also think that's a great best practice. Avoid overusing too many links. So I have seen newsletters that have 15 plus links. Again, picture, paragraph, call to action. Maintain a minimum of 14-point font size. Maintain good contrast. Avoid visual cues based on colors. And then include closed captioning for all videos that are being shared through your email marketing, okay? Now, again, this was all on the digital front. Let's just quickly talk about some things that you can incorporate, in particular, those that have a brick and mortar location, okay? So first things first is to take a moment to think about your business's physical space and assess it with all potential customers in mind. So noise, for example, what's the noise level? Can you make adjustments for the hearing impaired in that instance? Obstacles. Is the space easy to navigate, particularly for those with visual or motor impairments, like folks who are in a wheelchair? Access. So is there an elevator? Is there a wheelchair accessibility entrance and in the parking lot, for example? And then regulations. Do your counters and doorways complying with Americans with Disabilities Act regulations? So again, take one step at a time. I would start from, making sure that you're compliant and that we're making sure that we're keeping all potential customers in mind within our physical store, okay? Now, one thing to mention is for those of you that have a business profile on Google or even on your website, it's important for you to alert folks that you have wheelchair accessibility in your property, or that you are ADA compliant. These are all things that people are searching for when they're researching your business, is they want to make sure, can I actually access your brick and mortar location? What's going to happen once I arrive? Are you compliant? So these are all things that we want to keep in mind, okay? So in the end, accessibility is really about respecting the needs of others and understanding the challenges that they may face. So I want to close this session by offering a few thoughts on what it means to be inclusive when you interact with someone who has disabilities. So first, let's not assume. So many disabilities are invisible or hidden, including some physical disabilities or mental health conditions. It's also important to speak normally, so avoid over enunciating or slowing your speech or speaking loudly unless you're asked to do so, okay? Another good rule of thumb is if you aren't sure, ask. So ask before offering assistance, for example. So the person may refuse the offer, but it's okay to ask. And then respect an individual's request and personal space. For example, someone may ask you to write directions because they prefer them to verbal instructions. And that's me. Like when you start saying, go ahead, head north on it, I'm already lost. So I always prefer, written instructions. So try to accommodate requests when you can. And if a person uses a wheelchair, crutches, or cane, treat those items as part of their personal space as well. So here's the list that I was referencing throughout the presentation. Again, I have found as part of my training these last couple of months that there's a lot of valuable information. And the great thing, as I mentioned, is that when you make sure that your business and your website is accessible to everyone, you're going to find that these best practices are going to help you succeed, and also help you just on your digital marketing outreach as well, and your search engine optimization. Okay, so before I move on, I do want to mention that Google is offering these career certificates and scholarships. So if you are a business owner that is looking to train or have somebody within your team get trained on data analytics or digital marketing and e-commerce, Google is currently offering these Google Career Certificates, and you can apply for up to 500 scholarships depending on the number of employees that you have. And it's also important to mention that you don't need to have experience, and an employee can earn an industry recognized credential in 3 to 6 months by going through these certificates. Okay. So with that, I want to ask Vivian if she can join me again and help me if there's any questions or comments that were mentioned in the chat. Now is the time to address those. So Vivian.
Hello. I don't see any questions in the chat currently.
Okay. Any comments, even if you don't have a question, is there something in particular that you learned today or something that you had not considered? Again, this is a safe space. We're all here to learn. There may be something that, stood out to you that you want to apply to your business, or something that you're already doing that's working for you. We'd love to hear those types of comments as well.
I actually have a question / comment.
Sure.
So you mentioned that in emails and on websites, your calls to action should be more descriptive. And I think I'm guilty of putting, buttons on the page to say register here or learn more. How descriptive should those be?
So register here is great, right? So let's just think about that for a sec, right? So if you're having an assistant reader scanner reading that, right? And you just talked about a webinar that's going to be offered on a particular date. So in my opinion, the register now or offers a description of where they're going to be going. So you can maybe take a step further in saying, click here to register for webinar, right? And I know that in some instances, we're used to having these buttons that are 1 or 2 words because we want to keep them short and simple, right? But there may be instances where we have to just think about the keywords or just add 1 or 2 words extra. And I've started to apply this to my own emails, where I am adding like extra words just to make sure that they understand where they're going.
Okay.
Yeah, so I myself, again, have started to incorporate a lot of these tips in my own outreach efforts. Okay. I see something came in the chat. Yeah, so we have a comment here about the contrast, so the dotted lines and textures. Yes, I too was relying on color contrast, but we also see that you can take it a step further by including contrasting dotted lines. I particularly, when we look at the graph with the gray scales, I was thinking, is the gray scaling enough? And then when you look at how they added texture, it actually makes an even bigger difference, and it's definitely helpful. I appreciate the comment in the chat. Excellent.
Well, it looks like that may be all we have from the attendees today. I do want to say thank you so much, Israel, for joining us today and teaching us. I know that I learned a lot. There are definitely a few things I can incorporate on our website and in our emails. So I very much appreciate you being here and partnering with Grow with Google. I know that you all have a lot more webinars available to small businesses as well. And I hope that folks are able to take advantage of those too.
Yeah, and we'll be sending a copy of the presentation as well. So I know there was a lot of resources that are available. So those, Vivian, I'll hand you the copy of the slide deck so we can make that available.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome.
And I'll be sure to share those out with folks who attended. And to folks who signed up but weren't able to make it here in person, or I guess virtually today. Thank you. So I do want to take just one final minute to say thank you again to our event sponsors today: Seattle Public Utilities, Reach King County, and Business Health Trust. Thank you for all you do to support the Chamber's programming. I'd also like to thank again our small business champions. And I do want to give one more plug to the Seattle Chamber. If you enjoyed the program today and want to get more involved with what we're doing, you can visit our website at seattlechamber.com to become a member or to check out the great events we have coming up. And we hope to see you at some events in December or in the new year. Thank you again, Israel, for being here with us today. And thanks to all of our attendees.